Hey everyone, welcome to another Power Monkey podcast. On today's episode, Chad and I interview James Hobart. James is an OG of the CrossFit community. He has had a ton of different roles within the community. He's been an athlete at the Games 8 times, 3 as an individual and 5 as part of different teams. Back in 2015 and 2016, he finished at the top of the podium with CrossFit Mayhem. He is also one of the co-owners of CrossFit One Nation in Boston and has been recently named to the newly formed Athlete Advisory Council with CrossFit. This organization is basically made up of 4 different athletes who are meant to take the questions and the concerns from the athlete community and bring them to the organization. I can't think of a better person to help represent the athlete community than James. He's incredibly thoughtful, incredibly knowledgeable, and we're very, very lucky to have him on the podcast. We hope you guys enjoy this one. All right, James, good to have you on the podcast, man. How you been?
I've been very well. Thank you, guys. It's wonderful to see both of you again. I feel like I haven't seen you guys in a while.
Quite some time.
And I think that makes sense.
Absolutely, with everything going on. I don't think anybody has seen anybody outside of their immediate family for quite some time, that's for sure.
Right.
But our listeners probably might not know who you are firsthand. I want to give them a little bit of a rundown because in my mind, you're one of the most important people within the CrossFit community that most people probably don't know, kind of work behind the scenes. I'd like to give them a little bit of a rundown of all of the various roles that you have. I mean, from the athlete, from the gym owner, from, staff member. Can you just sum up the wide tentacles of roles that you have within the CrossFit community?
Yeah, that's a really nice thing for you to say. I find myself someone who's just been lucky to be in the right place at the right time a lot. Okay, so I've been involved with CrossFit and fitness for since, in a dedicated way since about 2007. And since 2007, I've competed in CrossFit up until about 2016. And in that time, I competed at the Games as both an individual 3 times and in a team 5 times. And through the team process, I was lucky enough to stand on the podium with 2 different teams, twice with CrossFit Mayhem Freedom and once with CrossFit New England. So a lot of time spent, but also a lot of success on the competing side, which was wonderful. But oddly enough, my real passion, which I never expected this, but started through the coaching aspect of it. And I've coached inside affiliates and coached athletes in CrossFit since about 2007. In that time, I've also worked with the CrossFit seminar staff training department since about 2010. Actually, this is October will be my 10th, October Halloween will be my 10-year anniversary on the dot with CrossFit seminar staff and their training department, which has been an amazing ride. And now I sort of operate, our internal lingo is called a flow master. So I kind of help lead the seminars during the weekend, but I've worked in that process for a while. On top of that, I currently own CrossFit One Nation Boston, which we've retained the affiliate CrossFit Boston, which Austin, myself, and then a third partner, we purchased that from the previous owner, Neil Thompson, who had been an affiliate owner. He had owned CrossFit Boston since 2005. And
Wow.
yeah, and it was really important to, that's a longer story, but short story is, it was really important to us. I believe they were one of the first 30 affiliates.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, it was really important to us to try and keep that going, and it was a very awesome experience for me because CrossFit Boston was the first affiliate that I started coaching at, and back in 2009 when I moved down to the city. So there was that. There's the affiliate ownership, the coaching piece. From there, I've worked on both sides of the field to assist with the partnership between Reebok and CrossFit. So I worked for Reebok for some time in their corporate headquarters at that time, which was in Massachusetts, still is. They were just in a different city. I worked with Reebok to help facilitate the CrossFit partnership. And then later on, a couple of years later, I would work for CrossFit on the CrossFit side to facilitate the partnership. And also currently working with I think our title is Athlete Advisory Committee. But it's a group of 4 athletes, and we're giving feedback and just having discussions with the rest of the games team, just as far as some big picture, and then also some smaller detail, but big picture elements, looking at the CrossFit Games season and events and things like that. And then probably the final thing that I'm actually super proud of, I did some color commentary at the CrossFit Games with the media team, which was a really cool experience because it was really far outside of my comfort zone. And you see a sport, and I'm sure you guys both understand this, you see a sport, you finally see it 360, right? Competing in it, coaching somebody in it, but then commentating on it gives you a new perspective of it, which I really liked. So I think that covers, I've touched a lot of bases inside of CrossFit. And part of that, I always tell people, I don't know if it's through any talent that I have, but I've just been in the community, in its overall lifespan. I've been in the community a long time, I think.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I don't really know too many other people that have had as many hats as you have within the community. I mean, that's pretty extensive. I think if anybody actually heard that list, they'd be like, I mean, this guy has his hand within the community at every level, which is incredible. And I want to touch on one of the things that you just mentioned there with regards to the Athlete Council, because I think, one, this is new, right? With everything that happened over the summer, with all the fallout that happened with Glassman and the transition that happened, and now the athletes having the ability to have more voice and more of a say in what happens next with their relationship with the organization. We've seen that both Chad and I were talking about this a little bit separately, about both of us having had athlete roles within the Olympic movement. And, I was an athlete rep for USA Gymnastics at both the Olympic committee level and also within USA Gymnastics for over a decade, and how important those roles are to be able to facilitate that conversation and make sure that the athlete's voice is actually heard on a regular basis. I'm curious if you could give us a couple of goals that you have as an athlete rep for what this committee intends to do. I know it's new. I know you guys are probably kind of feeling it out, but what do you really hope to do as an athlete council member with regards to that communication?
That's a really good question. And maybe it deserves a bigger answer. I'll try and kind of keep it as, not succinct, but as clear as possible. I think me personally, one of my big goals is just to try and relay as much as I can from personal athlete experience and perceived athlete experience, being in those other positions and knowing a handful of athletes who competed and still compete, and just relaying the perspective of a season all the way down to an individual event at like the CrossFit Games or at like a sanctional or something like that, relaying that information back up to the games team. And I think one of our big roles, everybody's big role on the Athlete Advisory Council is to provide some insight like that on just a more regular basis, which, I've always been a really big fan of the CrossFit Games as a whole. I do tell people like I'm a little bit biased. That's one of the reasons I've been in so many different departments and areas of CrossFit, is I do really appreciate it and believe in it. But I think the Games has always done the Games team has always done a really beautiful job of making incremental improvements and changes, as long as they've been around. And I think one of the things that they have started to feel is that they're now at a level of maturity is not the right word, but a development and maybe maturity where, having some more insight and more input can be a really, really productive thing. And that's not to say that they haven't always paid attention to that, but, year one, day one, when we were still doing our sanctionals and sectionals in parking lots, probably wouldn't have been the most productive time to have like all this outside input. You had to have some centralized direction. And so that's probably the biggest thing, is just giving continued insight and experiential insight into what the season is like as an athlete, and not just as an athlete at the tip of the spear, but, athlete jumping into the open first time, athlete competing at the Games first time, athlete competing at a sanctional multiple times, trying to qualify for the Games. So looking at it from all of those levels.
Mm-hmm. So I just have two other, this is just like a really cool piece for me, because I find it to be such a critical part of making sure that the whole system functions correctly. One, how were you guys selected? How were these 4 athletes selected to be the representative for the athletes? Was that a voting that was done by the games athletes? Was this done specifically by CrossFit headquarters? How were you guys put into those positions?
Yeah, I don't think there was voting done by specific athletes. I think I don't know the full answer to this. I think there was probably a pretty significant discussion through CrossFit Games team and other senior staff at CrossFit to search out athletes to fill this role. And yeah,
I think they did a great job with the group that they put together. So I'm really looking forward to kind of see that communication kind of play out. But I'm sure a ton of athletes have reached out. I'm sure a lot of them have been kind of on board with this process moving forward. Have you heard of any specific challenges or consistent themes that have come up to you so far from their perspective?
I've received some really nice support from athletes, and just the community in general was very sweet about it, which is always really nice. And and it's funny because it's like the support I received was big, and in my head I'm like, well, I still am just one tiny little cog, in the machine. And obviously I want to be a good representation and an effective representation of, but there are just so many moving parts and already so many good moving parts of it. So that was very sweet from people. I think one of the biggest things that athletes have wanted over the years of the games, and to some extent, I've seen this developing over the years, both, I think that it's already been a movement that's happening, but I think athletes have wanted more and more. I think it's just some more insight into, not to have a peek under hood of like, hey, what are the workouts we're doing at the games? But just more insight into the logistical process. What does the season look like? How does some of the elements of application of the games or the sanctional season come together, and maybe definitely some parity across qualification processes, because that's obviously something that's changed pretty significantly in the last, it feels like it's been 3 years since 2019, but that's changed a lot in the last year. And I think that's really just probably transparency is like the popular word that I keep hearing pop up. And what's tough about that too, I think, and cut me off if I'm just rambling, I think what's tough about that is it's not terribly specific. Like I get the idea, more transparency, but sometimes it's like, well, what do you want more transparency for? And, is that something that's productive? But that's probably the biggest thing I hear athletes talking about and wanting, is just understanding into the process of the season and seeing maybe some more transparency in the execution of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely not going to serve the community well, or the athletes, if they're confused, right? I think that's a big part of it, is that, they want to have a better, more simpler understanding perhaps in that regard, like you're talking about. And I think it's important too. I mean, this whole athlete council thing, just to make sure that, James, as an athlete, when you were going through those processes, did you feel overworked? Did you feel, how did you feel in general in many different aspects? And so important to have this athlete council, and I think it's going to benefit the games and CrossFit as a whole. I wanted to come back to another thing that you said, James. You talked about commentary, and I was able to listen to a little bit of that when you were doing it. And man, you got a lot of work to do. No, I'm kidding. No, you did an incredible job. I mean, you're an absolute natural, of course. And I heard, even just a couple people that I talked to about it were saying the same thing. And is that something that you plan on doing a little bit more of?
I really appreciate you saying that. It's funny. I thought a little bit about doing more commentary, especially last year. I was busy with other stuff, but through the sanctional season, I kept kind of kicking myself saying I should reach out and see if I can get more involved in that. Mm-hmm. So short answer is, I would certainly love to do it. I think, we would always, you joke, if some people would joke to me, they'd be like, media is where all washed up athletes go to die. But in a sense, right, that's a cynical way to look at it, because if you, if you've given a lot to the sport, the truth is, if I can't compete at that level anymore, you at least want to give insight into other people, whoever they are, watching into something that you love so much. And that's what I liked about it, was just to try and give some because even as athletes develop and get better, the performance of the sport increases, there are so many elements of the sport that will always be the same. And sometimes maybe from the outside, someone who's just watching it and never competed doesn't have insight into those. And it was always exciting for me. And I know you guys understand this. It's probably the same reason we like coaching, but it's exciting to share that with other people. So yeah, I would like to. It's probably, you know, it's a little footnote on the to-do calendar, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. I've done a lot of commentary with USA Weightlifting over the last handful of years, and I feel the same way as you. I really enjoyed it. It's a path that I want to use to give back and to help people, you know, try to help them understand more simply as I'm commentating and stuff like that. But I tell you, you know, not only have I realized how much I enjoy it, but I've learned a lot. And in fact, I think through those years, I've found that I've become a better coach because of it. For one, I'm just sitting there watching lift after lift after lift, and I'm commentating and expressing with words to the audience. So I'm continually learning and practicing my coaching ability in that aspect as well. And I feel like also I've become an even better competitor. Now I'm not at the elite level anymore, but, you know, I still do masters competitions and stuff like that. For you, was there anything that you feel you've learned through that process?
Yeah, I'm a lot, you know, and I worked a lot with Jeff Brightwell. He was the play-by-play commentary I worked with, and he's out of Memphis. But you know, he's been doing that. I mean, that is his profession. And one thing I learned was, you know, when you listen to these people on TV, these announcers on TV, one thing I learned was just like anything in life, you know, the amount of preparation that goes into a skill like that is immense. You know, to see how the announcers prepped was really mind blowing. And it was just always a good reminder of the hard work, the importance of hard work, regardless of skill. If someone makes it look easy, it's because they're really good at it, kind of deal. Regards to the sport, yeah, it gave me a lot of insight, you know, and it's funny you talk about that. Like, the reason I want to be a commentator is because, like, I'm just an aficionado of the sport of CrossFit. Like, and at one point in my life, the way for me to experience that was as a full-time competitor. And another part of my life, that's been as a coach. And then to do that as a commentator, like you said, it kind of allowed me to peel back a layer and look at it a little bit deeper. And I mostly did team commentary, and reflecting on it, when I competed on a team, and I think both of your sports are similar to this in a way, because CrossFit also, even though if you're competing on a team, you are to some extent, but you're not really in control of what the teams or the players to the left and the right of you do, right? It's not like you're like blocking a tackle. You know, it's just you and the bar, or you and the barbell, or a vault or something like that. And it became very tunnel visioned when I was competing. You know, like the tasks were very straightforward and in front of you. And competing or commentating allowed me to like really pay attention to what the heck everyone else was doing across the field. And for me, that gave us really great insight into what our team did inherently well and involuntarily and intuitively that we may not have known we were doing well. You know, everyone always pays attention to their mistakes. And obviously there was some things that we were kind of doing well without knowing it. And I wasn't really able to identify those and pick those out until I had really stepped away from competition, unfortunately, and then seen it on a compared, you know, stacked all the other teams up next to each other and looked at it. So that was a really cool thing to see.
Yeah. It's interesting for me with weightlifting. You know, I was able to do this immediately just because I've watched so much weightlifting anyway, even before commentating. And this is not something that I say out loud when I'm commentating, but I can almost see when someone's going to miss it or make it before they even take the attempt. If they've, you know, if they approach the bar differently than they did the time before, it could be anything. It could be even one little look on their face or something like that. So just the psychology behind it, and you know, like you said, James, what's going on off the platform, warm-ups and all that stuff. So it's very interesting.
I think that's really cool. Like you said, you just get to see it from a whole new way. And it opened my eyes. It made me appreciate what I had done more too. Because I also think you lose sight of that sometimes. Like, you're just grinding, picking up the barbell, you're chalking up, you know, doing whatever, you know, and the days just turns into weeks, months, and years. But it made me look back on it and be like, oh wow, I'm really glad we did all that. you know?
You kind of had an interesting experience as an athlete, kind of transitioning from being an individual to a team to individual to a team, kind of back and forth situation, right? I mean, you were with New England,
Yeah.
and you were then finished up your competitive career with Mayhem. Was that by design at all? Did you prefer competing as an individual versus a team?
It went back and forth. Did I prefer? You know, it's really hard. There were things I really liked about both, and unique things I liked about both, and that changed kind of depending on the season of life and what I really wanted to get out of it. One of the reasons I went 2010 to team was because a couple of reasons. I took some time off from training for some personal reasons, and then kind of came back to it and didn't feel like I was ready to compete or push for individual again, but didn't want to take a year off for competing. So at that time, team seemed like the right fit. Also, I didn't do a great job early on in 2009, 2010, a decade ago, of when I was training as an individual, training with others and making like a enjoyable training experience. Like I did a lot of training by myself at that time, and it just wasn't fun. You know, I would like the competing at the end of the year was this great reward and prize. And what I loved about the team aspect of it is that the training was like so much more enjoyable. Misery loves company. You know,
Sure.
It's like why the CrossFit class is fun. And but I did a lot of training by myself, and I didn't like it. And so I went back to team, and, you know, then you start training around people. I started getting really fit because you had people to chase, people who would chase you, push you. And that, I think that got me to a point where I was like, well, you know what? I want to try individual again, you know, see how that can go. And then another opportunity popped up, and I think that's why I went back to team. So
How was that last little push with Mayhem? How was it training with Rich and being a part of that team when you guys ended up back on the podium again?
Yeah, it was amazing. You know, what really changed, I think, when I went down to Mayhem is, one, you know, sometimes I think really good athletes, and you guys can probably attest to this, right? You guys are training and competing at the highest levels of your sport. There were things, and it goes back to the commentating thing, but there were things that you guys probably did really well that other competitors who hadn't made it to where you guys were, they either looked at you and thought it happened automatically, or they were just like, that guy's just lucky, or he just gets it and never learned it. And you guys might have done some of that intuitively. Like you had an idea of what you were doing, but you didn't have to practice those skills. And I think a lot of athletes, the reason I say this, look at Rich and what he's done at Mayhem. And, you know, it's easy for him to come across as just some kind of like, I don't know, just some kind of like quiet meathead jock, you know, like he's just good at lifting weights and suffering. Point being is like Rich was really in tune to, he just didn't speak about it a lot. He was really in tune to what he was doing well, you know, analyzing what worked really well for him. And I think he figured out a really good recipe for how to be effective in training for as a team. And so one of the biggest changes is when I went down there was it was really treated like this was our full-time job. It was a job we liked. But we, you know, we paid attention to a lot of details, and that happened when I was at New England too, but it was just more of my lifestyle, you know, generated this ecosystem to push toward the competing. Whereas probably leading up to that, it's like I trained a lot and I cared about my training, but, you know, it was a compartmentalized piece from my life. Whereas down at Mayhem, it was like, it kind of pervaded everything. It was like the life was built around to support the training.
Yeah.
And that was probably the biggest thing that changed. And I know you guys get that from what you do. In both of your sports.
Yeah,
like
I think there's a lot of similarities to that for sure. You know, when you only see the end result, when a spectator only sees the end result, they never see the suffering that goes on behind the scenes. And, you know, it's nice to see every once in a while. You go in like at the big training center, you know, we have people that just come through and can watch practice, and they can see us fall on our face and curse at the apparatus and yell at things and, you know, have terrible days in the gym. And that gives insight into us working through all the shit that goes along with becoming a really high level athlete. But when you only see the end result, you get a skewed view as to what goes into being an elite athlete. You end up thinking that it's heavily skewed towards just talent and not the hard work that goes along with it. So it's really good to hear that. Rich is an anomaly, right? I think Rich and Fraser are kind of like anomalies in the sense that they have a combination of certain things, right? It's hard work, yes.
Yeah.
But it is talent, and I look at it as timing and environment are the other missing pieces of it to make a generational athlete, right? You need the right timing for that person to be at their peak with the right people surrounding them, with the right coaching, with the right people pushing them. And all of those things need to kind of connect to be able to have someone that kind of stands out within a group of great people. And you have that with Rich, you have that with Fraser, and that's kind of a unique setting. But I mean, I'm sure you've seen that firsthand, having trained with those guys so often. But I've always looked at that as kind of what stands out with somebody that's kind of generational.
Yeah, and I think it goes a couple different ways. It's like, I think physically, they probably have some tools that other athletes don't, but on top of that, they also have a work ethic and an ability to and a tolerance for, failure, like how many lifts do you mess up, or, how much practice with the basics do you do? They have a certain tolerance for that is way higher than other people's. Like their work ethic also, I think, is astronomical. And, that's what's hard to see. But, they combine both.
The true test is really longevity. You don't have the longevity that both of those guys have had, and especially Rich at this point. And you, James, I mean, you've been in there in the deep, highest level of competitions for all these years, and you don't have that on talent alone, so you have to say these guys have way more than just talent. Talent is only, I don't want to say it's a small part of it, because it's big, like it's a big advantage if you've got it. But in the scheme of things, longevity wise, if you can be successful year after year after year for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, then you've got a lot of other things that are special that are combining in there. As you were talking about that, James, I feel like what I got from that in some of the things that you said is that being an individual athlete versus being a team athlete, and what I would perceive from the outside looking in is that being an individual athlete is probably more difficult physically and potentially mentally. Would you agree with that?
I'm not sure, just because I think it depends what your goal is. I think if your goal is just to show up as a team and have some fun, individual, I think is can be way more of a beatdown physically. But I think on either side, if your goal is to go be the champion, to win, I didn't notice a difference between the physicality of it, and they were both equally bad, I think. And maybe that's changed now for some people, but and that could probably be said for the other end of it too. I think as an individual, I think it really depends what your end goal is. If your end goal is just to go there and have fun, right. I think certainly like the individuals at the games take on a larger load of volume and maybe intensity in their week, but in the training, the training of both were equally bad. The test at the end, I think, probably was a little tougher physically as an individual. I felt like it was tougher mentally as a team because, as you're an individual, like you can have a little temper tantrum by yourself back in your little athlete stall and be mad at yourself. And you're the only one that sees that, really. Whereas on a team, you're having to manage your emotional state, and how does your emotional state react to others, and how do you react to them. So I always felt like there was more mental fitness needed on a team than an individual for me.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think that most people would think by far the individual part of it is more physically demanding, but I mean, I can't say anything. I mean, I've been doing CrossFit for 10 years, James, and I'm still terrible at CrossFit. I mean, Dave Durante can beat me in a CrossFit workout. How good
that shows you how terrible he is.
That's what I'm saying, right? But he even beat me in a weightlifting workout. I mean, with the barbell. I mean, I don't know what to do.
It was probably just a barbell, though.
They would say anything under at 95 pounds and under. Yep. I can. You put 96 pounds, it's over.
Well, it was the open workout from last year, and I was so afraid when it came up that they were going to pick 95. I was like, at least give me 115, at least 115, 135 would be great, no problem. 95, and I'm like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But
reps and speed are scary. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
still with you. I'm with you on that.
man, I feel like I tell people this all the time. I mean, I'm a weightlifting specialist, of course, but I would rather do anything inside of a WOD, probably even run over a barbell, over
Yeah.
touch and go snatches or clean and jerks. I mean, they're just so complex and man, difficult.
You just said you'd rather run. I've never heard you say that before in your life.
I mean, I might rather run in a WOD. Yeah, that's
2020,
hard,
man. Look, there you
hard
go.
for me to say. Yeah, I mean, I am getting older. I've been doing, I've been weightlifting for a long time, but I wanted to talk a little bit. Speaking of that stuff, I wanted to talk a little bit about movement and coaching and performance and stuff like that, because you have worn all these different hats. You've seen all sides from an athlete. You've been a coach. You've been a teacher through the certifications and stuff like that. When it comes to athletes with these high level goals, like they want to be the best athlete that they can be, whether that's just for themselves, weekend competitions, or whether they want to go to the CrossFit Games. And this is kind of a broad question, broad topic, but I want to dig into it a little bit. I want to hear your thoughts on, is there anything that sticks out to you that you can think of that you believe can and or should be different when you're teaching or coaching a CrossFit athlete, we'll start off with, that wants to go to the games, versus a CrossFit athlete that is in it for just health, just a stay-at-home mom, or a 50-year-old male that has had multiple knee surgeries and he just wants to get in shape and lose weight and be healthy?
Yeah. Short answer is yes. There's definitely a difference. I think just from like the long-term fitness pursuit, I think probably the two things I would just equip them with is that, the notion that consistency is super important. The more consistent, and this will go for the top guys too, but consistency will trump a lot of the what ifs and what should I do's. On top of that, from my experience, and I've been doing CrossFit now for 13 years, and I'm training less than I was when I was competing, and the goal is markedly different. But I'm training 5 times a week, maybe. Let's call it 5 times a week, mostly 1 hour. It's like a normal session, warm up, workout, cool down. And I'm still seeing little PRs in places. And there are probably some performances that I won't touch again.
Right.
But I've still been gaining fitness in places, which is a really cool thing for me to see. Because one, it shows me it's like, hey, as you get older, it doesn't just mean everything goes downhill. That's always exciting. It shows how important consistency is. It shows how powerful variance can be when well applied. And it's always just a reminder that what I've been teaching people for the last decade, like, guys, this works. Like, we're not trying to sell it to you because we think it just sounds cool. Like, it actually does work. So I think those things are really important for anyone just looking to, how do I stay fit and get fit for a lifetime or just my life? Mm-hmm. I think the biggest change, and the first question I ask is, if someone wants to compete at a high level, is just, what's your time resource? What is your commitment level? Because I think until they answer that question, there's a lot of things that'll either open a lot of doors or close a lot of doors. Because I look at time is the currency that you need to buy different skills and go in different training doors. It's, someone once asked me at a seminar, and this is when I was training down at CrossFit Mayhem with Rich and the Mayhem Freedom team. They said they were following Rich's online programming. And they pulled me aside, and he would post everything that he would do pretty much in a day on that program, which was a lot because it was our job. And someone pulled me aside and they said, hey, how do you guys do all this in an hour?
Oh God.
And I was like, and I thought he was kind of like having a go at me.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean in an hour? And he goes, yeah. How do you guys get all this done in an hour? And I was like, dude, this takes us all day. And there's like snack breaks and stretch, and there's warm-ups in here that we're not adding in. Like, it's a job. And so I
Right.
think that's one of the first things athletes who are competing have to look at is what is their willingness, commitment level, resource allocation that they can put toward the job of competing. And that's going to change, depending on what level you want to compete at. So that's kind of the first conversation and place I start. And obviously that matters for someone coming in to your gym 1 hour a day too, like what's their commitment level. But as long as they can be consistent to that 1 hour class, I think it's less of a conversation. And then, to circle back, Chad, to your point about quality of movement, I have seen, and I do know in CrossFit, you can get pretty fit and pretty far and move poorly.
Right.
Unfortunately, because I do believe that, the movements, they're natural to what we do. I believe they're inherently safe. I'm not saying, please, everyone out there, I'm not saying, hey, go move poorly, move as fast and as heavy as you can, and, no worries. And that can be deceptive for athletes because they can get pretty fit doing that. But I think at some point, if they really want to stand on the top of the pile, they have to pay attention to movement quality too. So from a training aspect, I'm also a big fan of building things concurrently, unless you have a really long time frame. And so what I mean by that is like, just like you would coach an athlete in class, this doesn't change. Athletes need to be able to be exposed to intensity, and while they're doing that, improve movement quality. So as a coach of athletes at that top level, you got to deal with that. Now, depending how much time they have, obviously, is going to dictate how pieces or what pieces we allocate times towards. So I think those are kind of two of the biggest differences. And the athlete is going to need a little bit more volume, is going to need a little bit more intensity who's trying to go to the games than someone who just wants to get fit for life. I mean, if you want to get fit for life, it's warm up, workout, cool down 5 to 6 days a week, and be consistent. I always joke, I think if, everyone in CrossFit, aside from maybe the top 10 games athletes, scaled every workout they ever did, we'd all still get fitter for a lifetime.
Oh yeah.
Maybe not as fit or as fast as we'd want to, but it would happen. Like, I truly believe that, like 100%. So
absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, you did. And I'll just touch on that real quick, Dave. I know you had something to say there, but I think the biggest thing that you mentioned is consistency. That's the biggest thing, and that kind of brings me back a little bit too to one of the things that you said when you started training less, James, for you, because you had trained so frequently at a high level for so long. It's almost like I believe your body getting that little bit of break allowed you to surge ahead in some of those areas. The same thing happened for me. I lifted my best total ever, after the 2008 Olympics. I'd been to the Olympics twice. It was 3 years after that in 2011 when I was 31 years old, where I took 6 months out of the gym. I came back and brought myself to 95% of my best lifts ever on 3 days a week, up to 4 days a week for another year when I'd been training 6 to 9 workouts a week. Ended up getting a PR, on my total. I think it was a kilo, but hey, one kilo more than I'd ever lifted. And so for me, I wish I would have trained less sooner, but at the same time, there's a fine line there, because if you want to be the best that you can be, you've got to get to a certain volume level.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think people need to remember, like, volume isn't a one-bladed tool. I think some people just look at, like, volume training is just going to, is what we need to do because that's going to drive adaptation. And it's like, well, you could use volume as a training tool, because in CrossFit, this matters. Like, you have to know how to perform and perform consistently when you're a little bit beat down because you have multiple event days. So it's like, you should use volume to train for that once in a while. But then the open rolls around. The open's one workout a week for 5 weeks. So volume is less of a priority. You just need to be able to shift into top gear and blast workouts, and I think people need to, it's helpful as a games athlete or a competitive athlete to look at volume as, a tool that can contribute to or take away from different things. Like you said, I had one of my best open performances in 2017, which was the year after I stopped competing with Mayhem. And I just felt I had all this rest. And it was the same thing. I was like, one workout a week, like I could just jump 10,000% into this because I'm finally rested and I have all that other lessons learned. So yeah, that's a really cool thing.
Do you have any goals that you set yourself up for now as an athlete? Do you have anything you're training for? Or is it just basically quality of life at this point?
Yes and no. I don't know how competitive you guys still are. I smell it, right? You're talking a little
Just
smack
with each
to
other.
each other. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, that's as long as I can beat Dave every now and then, I'm fine. So.
But and it's like, I think in certain people that never goes away. It's just the
Right.
where you shine that light changes. It's like for you guys, it was like the Olympics, and then it was now it was somebody else. Now it's a personal PR. Now it's each other. So short answer is yes. I have a couple of goals. I really I've been working around some injury with this, but I think I'm getting ready. I want to be able to snatch 275. I came really close in competing. I would like to be able to like clean and jerk 315, like just regularly, which just comes down to me being I just got weak little bird legs, as Bergner would always tell me, which is true.
You don't have bird legs. I mean, that your
I
legs.
have bird legs.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dave.
But yeah,
okay.
I know what you're saying.
I have Dave legs +2.
There you go.
Right.
And then last year, I think I finished like high hundreds, like close to 200, but top 200 in the Worldwide Open. This year, I want to get back within the top 100. Just as like, because I love the Open. I know it stresses people out, but it's like the fact that I know I get to compete against 500,000 people potentially. It just really is exciting, and I love it. I love how crazy it is and how crazy the Open makes people. Like normal human beings lose their minds. And they ruin best friendships over the CrossFit Games Open. So those are my two personal goals. And other than that, it's just be healthy. Maybe run a sub 20-minute 5K. I've been running a lot, but those just like little. And I want to run a marathon, but no specific speed. And that's just to kind of like check that fitness box.
I'm making a note over here, James. There was not
and
one
get a
gymnastics
strict bar
goal.
muscle.
No.
Say that. It was like I got smoked. We had to demo movements down at the CrossFit HQ, and I was down there with Pamela Gagnon and Camille LeBlanc Bazinet, and they had to do a strict bar muscle up, and I couldn't do one. And they smoke checked me, and I just got ridiculed. And they kind of taught me to do like a chicken wingy one. Yeah. But that's actually been on my list. So Dave, if you want to, I would gladly take help there. And
you got it.
The 275 too. So, I kind of talk to the right guys.
Yeah. Well, for sure. Well, and I was just about to say, cause you talk about snatching 275 and bringing the bar muscle up. That reminds me of the Again Faster Summit back in 2010. That's where I first met you. Yeah. And I can just remember watching you guys get after it. I mean, I was just so incredibly impressed. And I remember bar muscle up, seeing Pat Barber just ridiculously easy. I mean, like just muscling to his belly button pretty much before he even turned over, right? No kip, strict bar muscle up. It's just impressive. And I'd been used to watching, the top dogs in just my gym back home and being very impressed with them. I mean, they could easily smoke me, no problem, but you guys were at such a higher level, and it was really, really amazing to watch. Great learning experience for me. And I wanted to ask too, going back to fitness versus performance, you guys doing strict bar muscle ups, you wanting to do a strict bar muscle up, you wanting to snatch 275. What is your take on those types of movements with these athletes that are just in it for health and longevity? Do you believe in heavy, deep back squats? Do you believe in them, heading towards max squat snatches, bar muscle ups, handstand push-ups, handstand walks, ring muscle ups? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think overall, I'll say, I think the, except for a couple extreme cases, I think most people, qualify for even those advanced movement patterns. And by that qualify, I mean, like, I think it's okay to teach them to them. Now there's some other, everyone's always like, well, what about so-and-so who's, this old and she has to replace this and replace that. And it's like, well, we can find an exception to every rule, even if it's a good rule or good idea. But I think some of that changes, right? So, and it's based off of, and we say this at the level 1, I think it's based off of somebody's relative intensity, and relative intensity has always been based off of psychological, physiological tolerance. My mom, who's 60 this year, you know, and she has learned in the last 6 years of doing CrossFit how to squat snatch, how to clean and jerk, how to do ring dips, strict pull-ups, handstand holds she loves. Can't quite get a handstand walk yet, but she's a big yogi. She loves gymnastics, so handstand hold is amazing. But the intensity of those things, i.e. the speed at which she executes, the loading at which she executes, is very different from how I would do them. And for me now too, like I said, I think to compete at the tip of the spear, your movement quality has to be as excellent as your ability to apply intensity to a workout. But that being said, in most sports, when you compete, your risk tolerance is a little higher. Like you might do little tweaks, little changes, accept a quality of movement that is a little bit less than the ideal, because sometimes that might be what you need to do in order to get the gold medal. I mean, think about any sport, racing, football, whatever, you know, fill in the blank, weightlifting, gymnastics. And that's changed for me now personally. And that's probably also like handstand walking. Like I was never a technically good handstand walker. I was flexible. I could dangle my heels over my head, you know, and my shoulders were pretty strong. So I could perform well at a handstand walk event. And now, but I never like, you know, I wouldn't finish one of those events and like, oh, wow, I feel excellent after that, you know? And so now if I handstand walk, I do try a little bit harder. Mm-hmm. All right, let's try and keep the legs inside the width of my shoulders. Let's try and not bend the knee so much. You know, let's try and walk and warm up my hands and my wrists a little bit differently, because I'm just not as willing to like ride the line as much as I used to. So I guess short answer is, I'd have to think of some exceptions to the rule to avoid progressing people toward or teaching people higher skill movements or higher level of complexity movements. But I think if you remove, if you adjust the intensity factor relative to, you know, where they're at mentally, oh, hey, whoa, you know, even though I think I could squat snatch my body weight, I'm cool with 95 pounds. Great, stay there.
Yeah.
And you adjust it to their physiological capacity. You know, I've had I'm X years old, or I'm this new to CrossFit, or I've had my, I don't know, whatever, injured last week. Okay, well, we'll just stay really light. So yeah, that's kind of my short answer on it. I think I got there eventually, but I think they're great to teach. And, you know, my mom's version of a muscle up might not ever be a kipping muscle up on the high rings, but it's right. Like, why couldn't I teach her a hollow rock sit position? Why couldn't I teach her a progression on low rings? It's a muscle up. It's just it's the lightest version of a muscle up. You know, it's the PBC squat snatch version of the muscle up. And for me, that's how I view it.
Yeah, I guarantee your handstand walk looks better than mine for some reason. When I get upside down and start walking on my hands, my legs go into a full squat position. So I don't know what that is. Maybe I'm just so used to being in the bottom of the squat. It's just, right? Just my legs go but I'm able to walk that way, not for very long, but I'm able to do it. So Dave still refuses to teach me how to do that. He doesn't want me to have a chance.
I don't want to have advantages. No way.
Well, you don't want me to claim that, hey, Dave taught me how to do this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, because if he messes it up, you don't want to be on the hook.
Yeah, like, I don't know. He learned that on his own. Yeah. But it comes down to foundation, though, right? I think this fits along into what Chad and I teach and what we do with Power Monkey in general, is just this mentality of training every skill towards the highest level version of that movement. And essentially, if we can create a really solid foundation around basic level movements and gymnastics, what we always teach is our phase one within Power Monkey is creation of good shapes. Can we create a good shape? Do we have the mobility and the core strength to be able to put you in the position that we need at a higher level? It's not just jumping to a bar muscle up. It's not just taking somebody who's never done that movement before and say, I want to do this tomorrow, and a coach is throwing them through the movement. It's setting a foundation, allowing that person to kind of chip away at potentially getting there. So I agree with you, James, completely that, you know, I don't want to take anything off the table from that learning process until it is deemed necessary. You know what I mean? So, and I think for both, I love that. And I think for both levels of athlete, you know,
competitor or newbie, it doesn't matter, any level of athlete walking the door. I think they're the important lesson to learn there, that it's easy to lose sight of because of the excitement of it sometimes, or maybe our own ego, or somebody else's ego pressuring us, is that, what is it they always say? It's not the destination, but the journey kind of deal. Like, there's still a lot of value for any level of athlete going back and practicing a kip swing. One of the things we started doing at Mayhem, it was because like we were all pretty good at kipping pull-ups, butterfly kipping pull-ups. Like we had tons of those in the bag. And I remember we did this one strict pull-up workout, and I sucked, man. Like I had over 50 chest to bar unbroken butterfly pull-ups, easy. But I was like, I can't do 10 strict pull-ups. Like I was like, so we went through this period where really one of the only times we would do kipping, butterfly kip, is if we were in a competition setting. And we would maybe, check it once in a while, make sure the skill's still fresh. But, a lot of it became gymnastic kipping pull-up, L sit pull-up, because we sucked at those, mega, strict pull-up. We also did this other drill for like ever. But every time we would go into the gym, we would do with a PVC every minute or every 30 seconds for 5 minutes, we do 10 slow air squats. Because it was it warmed you up just to tune it up. And, and this is, Rich was doing some of this stuff. He's the fittest dude. And, I just, like you said, the foundations are super important, and there's always value you can extract out of them. And it's cool, because it was nice to finally get 20 strict pull-ups and feel like a tough guy.
Yeah.
And I know that my goal was 30. I came close, and I should get back on. I think I got to 27. So I'd like to get 30.
Nice.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about this odd year we have. 2020, obviously it's a strange one. I don't think anyone in our lifetime has gone through anything similar so far, but it's kind of had a pretty significant impact specifically on the CrossFit world with everything that happened in the last few months, and kind of a roller coaster. And I'm sure it's been a roller coaster for you as well, but it seems like we're seeing a little bit of the light at the end of the tunnel right now, with a lot of positive changes, a lot of excitement and positivity coming about with the new CEO, Eric. And I'm curious what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts on new CEO change, and in your mind, how is it going to change what CrossFit is going to look like over the next 5 years? Like, what is your vision for what this could potentially turn into? How can this become a positive?
Yeah. I think I'll just say this, like, personally, I'm really hopeful. I think there has been a lot of positive changes in terms of what Eric and his resources and his insight bring to CrossFit at this point in our development as not just a global community, but as a global company. And I think if you look at companies that have had longevity historically, and I don't want to go way too down the rails with this, but I think, every leader that company has had probably has, shelf life isn't the right word, but, every leader has probably a certain amount of time where their skill set, their ingenuity, their insight brings what is needed for that company at that time. And I think where we are right now as a company, I think it's like Eric is a good fit for that. Mm-hmm. Like I said, we're at this point where, you have probably roughly, last time I checked, it might even be higher now internationally, but 50% of the affiliates inside the United States, 50%, I think it's more than that. I think more than 50% of our affiliates exist outside of the US. That says something about what is needed in the community and how the community and our resources and our training and the games and everything will need to develop should it want to continue to grow. And I think if you look at somebody like Eric's background and his influence and experience in tech and some of the people that he's friends with and has access to, I definitely think he can bring that to CrossFit. As far as what changes might occur, that's tough for me to say. Like I said, I'm hopeful. It sounds to me like they're doing some really awesome things as far as providing more resources to affiliates. whatever that looks like. I'm really excited to see what that is. You know, I think our affiliate community is amazing. And if you all watched the town hall that Eric did with our director of training, Nicole Carroll, and he talked a lot about helping affiliates better share best practices. So an affiliate in Louisiana who's struggling with dealing with COVID closures can share best practices with somebody who's in Texas or something like that. I think that's super important. That's something I would like to see. I don't know what that'll look like. I believe that'll happen. As far as the games changes, I think similarly, you know, I don't know what Eric will bring to that specifically, but it's clearly, you know, he's kind of put his foot down as that's something that's really important to him. Mm-hmm. And I know we've seen attention from CrossFit Inc., the attention that they pay to the games. I shouldn't say they, because I don't know if it's everybody in the corporation, but the attention that has been paid to the games has changed over the years, and resources have been allocated differently. And like I said, I think one of the things that's cool about the games is they've done an incredible job. Dave and his team and Justin Bird and everybody on that team have done an incredible job with like, hey, here's the tools we have. Let's find the best way possible to find the fittest on earth. I'm excited to see how that continues to grow. So,
and on the CrossFit training side, anything that you envision kind of developing or evolving on that side of things, since you're so heavily involved there?
Yeah, you know, I'm really interested to see, you know, like I said, Eric's a big tech guy, and I don't know if you guys have perused around his LinkedIn, but he's had some involvement with some other online platforms. I'd be really curious to see how he can develop technology to allow the CrossFit training arm to continually disseminate and localize and make more accessible the information that we offer. You know, right now our training team is amazing. You know, we have seminar staff, over 200 staff all over the world. We have some seminar staff who, you know, some places where we're running a level 1 seminar in entirely a different language. Most of the time it's translated, but you know, I think we'll be able to now with better access and resources like that to provide more information globally and in local languages, which I think is really, really cool. And our translation department has already done that. You know, we offer the test in multiple languages. You know, we offer the level 1 manual in multiple languages, but, you know, imagine, and we're already translating some of those demo videos that you guys have seen, but, you know, like imagine if that just becomes something where it's like, no matter where you are in the world, you know, if you don't speak English, hey, here's somebody demoing the squat snatch and giving you the points performance, you know, in your language. Like I think that's awesome. And I do think we're headed in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds awesome. It sounds like, yeah, I mean, I'm really hopeful. I mean, it was kind of touch and go there initially. So many people kind of having different perspectives on what's happening, but I think this is really going to be a great new phase for getting people to move better, move as a community. And I'm excited to see what happens next. And I really do believe, I know I mentioned it briefly in the beginning, that you're actually a big part of it in my mind. I remember meeting you years back and just being like, man, this guy, you were still an athlete at the time, but I just had a hope more than a feeling that you would have a really big impact in the direction that CrossFit was going, because you're a combination of a really bright guy, no nonsense, and, you know, you have a real level head when it comes to kind of understanding what the community needs. So I think you're kind of well positioned to really help the community of CrossFit kind of move into the next phase of where it's going.
Yeah, wow. That's one of the nicest things anyone's ever said, Dave. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
And you know what I hope people see, and I think you guys, and I'm going to return a compliment, but I mean it, it's sincere, you know, and I think you guys are two people who embody this, but, you know, I hope people start to see or get a chance to see the synergy across areas of CrossFit. I think, you know, maybe in the past it's looked like, well, there's CrossFit Inc., and then there's the training arm, and then there's the games. And, you know, one of the things that I get to see in working with different people from, you know, in different departments of CrossFit, whether it be media or in content or the IT team or the training team or the games team, is just how heavily invested, you know, they all are in it being pushed forward, you know, in people getting more access to it, whether regardless of, you know, the corner of fitness that we're talking about here. There's just a really big a big love for the development of CrossFit and all aspects of it. And I hope people get to see more of that and those pieces get more unified. I think that'll be really cool. And like you guys said, I mean, in being in all aspects of a competitor of a sport, a coach of a sport, it's cool when people get to see really how closely all those line up, because I don't think that makes sense to everybody all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. So, I mean, that communication part is so critical. And yeah, I'm excited. It's a good time to be around with all the shit going on and all the terrible stuff. I think it's a good time. I think 2021 is going to be a very, very positive year in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I am, hey, and, for the people who keep moving forward, the people who, are finding ways to coach people virtually, digitally, finding ways to do seminars safely, finding ways to, just keep pushing forward with podcasts. I think it's those people who are just kind of, regardless of like, hey, we're walking in the dark, but we're going to keep freaking stepping forward.
Mm-hmm.
I think those people are the best equipped to just see what comes next, even if it's sort of like a shaky another year. I think, I have a lot of hope for it too. Yeah, I share in that.
Yeah. So it's just about being resourceful. And I think we're a good group of people that are capable of doing that. I think the community in general is pretty resourceful. So yeah, it's going to be exciting next year. As soon as we get out of 2020, we'll be in good shape. So we're coming towards the end of the podcast, James, and we appreciate the time so far, but we got a couple last questions that we normally kind of go through if you're open to sticking around for another couple of minutes.
Oh yeah, man, I got time for you guys. I appreciate it.
All right. So this first one is an important one for us. We have a tally going, and so is there a sport or discipline that you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
Oh man, can I say that I've been really into Formula One racing right now?
That would probably be the best answer. Yeah.
Here's what I'll say. I spent a bigger part of my CrossFit career really focused on weightlifting, and Coach Bergner was one of the first kind of specialists I met in the sport, and then you, Chad. So I'm more exposed to that side of it. So I would say right now, if there's an area I need to grow or learn more about, it's the gymnastics side. But I'm
going to take that as a diplomatic answer. Another diplomatic answer. But it sounded like weightlifting. It sounded like weightlifting, which is fine with me.
I definitely, I think so.
Well,
but I gotta get that strict. But if you help me get that strict bar muscle up, I'll say gymnastics.
All right, so we'll put an asterisk next to it. There's an asterisk next to weightlifting.
No, this is a one-time thing. We can't go back on it. It's weightlifting, and it's stuck in there. It's recorded on this podcast forever. So I don't want to have that point taken away from me. But I do. Going back to that again, Faster Summit before, man. When I first saw you move, James, I was convinced that you were an elite lifter. I mean, you move so well with the barbell. So I'm glad to hear that you enjoy it so much.
Yeah. Now I just got to keep getting stronger. That's the pursuit, right?
That's right.
All right. Question number 2 for you, James. Is there a guest that you would like to see us have on the podcast? Anybody that you think would be a great person for us to interview?
Oh man. My wife. Yeah, she's a nutrition. There you go. She's a nutrition coach.
She works with.
She's been grinding at it.
She works with M2, right? She helps out Mike Malloy and M2 crew.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We'd love to have her on.
Yeah.
She's quite a badass athlete herself, right?
I was gonna say not just because she's my wife, but I sort of, like we were talking about, people just grinding hard through COVID, and I've been kind of watching her from the side, and it's cool to watch people work when things aren't always easy, even though we get to work from home. So, we're super fortunate with that privilege, but she's been hustling. And so I'm excited to see what the next couple of years have in store for her.
Great. Love hearing that.
Well, now, James, I know you didn't say that just because she's your wife, but I do hope that you get some brownie points for that.
Yeah,
as you should.
I'll make sure she listens to this.
For sure, absolutely. At least this one little segment. Accidentally this one little segment. But last question here until we get you out of here, and it's kind of a two-parter. The first part of it is that what do you prefer? Reading a book, watching a movie, a documentary, a TV series, or listening to a podcast?
Well, I don't want to be a fence sitter because I kind of was early on in a question, but each of those I like doing at different times. Mm-hmm. But my favorite, I love to read. I love to read a physical book. It was a big part of my upbringing. And I spent a lot of time in school. I love reading, and regardless of genre, I'm a huge believer that, you always have something to learn from an experience that's not your own. And, I had some good parenting in the sense that they were always like, in a nice way, my perspective is not the only perspective. And reading is, the reading and meeting people and traveling have been the two biggest avenues to do that. So I love reading. I've been doing way more podcasts as I drive now, but yeah.
Awesome. What is your number one recommendation on books? What's your favorite?
Oh, my favorite book is probably is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I think is my favorite book. That or the Iliad. But what I would be reading, I read this book recently, and it was called. This is the genre jumping piece. It's called The Genius of Birds, and it just talks about the study of measuring intelligence of birds. Which this doesn't sound like an exciting book.
No, it does.
The way I'm making it sound. But you read this book and you'll never look at a bird the same way again. It's just really, really interesting. And also it has this really cool discussion about the development of just animals in general, and how is actually an effective way to measure intelligence, which is a really interesting conversation when you start thinking about it. But that was a book I read recently, which it kind of got me really into the subject matter even more, which I really liked. So it was one off the top of my head that I loved.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate that recommendation there. And James, man, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a great conversation with you. Love the chat. Look forward to hopefully seeing you again sooner than later. It's been way too long since I've seen you or talked to you at all. And would love to run into you at another summit at some point. That was a really cool experience for me.
Or we can get you at the Power Monkey Camp.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I've always, it's because you guys have been down there when I've been down there, and But that would be amazing. And thank you both so much. It's wonderful to see you, and I hope everybody's families are doing well. So grateful to be here, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, man. Do you have any parting words for our listeners? Anything you got coming up you want folks to know about? I know you got some online programming type stuff that you do, right?
Yeah. So myself and our other partners, Austin Malleolo and Spencer Hendel, and recently we brought on a young man, Travis Urbanek, and he's helped us really build out the flashiness of our program. But anyway, so we run the Ham Plan. It's online programming for affiliates and individuals. And in this time, that's definitely been in a labor of love. And as you guys, I'm sure know, a really interesting thing to try and build out. So working on that. Other than that, anything big coming up? I don't know. I think that's really it right there.
Yeah.
That's probably the big. I just had my year anniversary. More brownie points.
There you go.
Congrats,
nice.
Yeah. So
that's the biggest announcement right there. That's for sure.
Yeah, year one's the make or break, right? We're good
That's
now.
right.
So
oh yeah, you're in it. You're in it now. You're definitely committed. But talking about the Ham Plan, I've seen you guys doing that for a while now. A lot of content surrounding it. Mention that it's for affiliates and for individuals. So where can folks check that out? Do you guys have anything where they can see samples or anything like that?
Oh yeah, really appreciate that. I think our Instagram handle is at Hamplan, www.thehamplan.com, or if they want to search me out on Instagram, I'm just at James Hobart. I'm always happy to answer questions. I'm the guy, and the joke is the only problem with CrossFitters is they never stop talking about CrossFit. So I fit that mold. Always happy to chat. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, to our listeners out there, hopefully you will check that out. Look James up if you're not familiar. He's a great one in the community, as Dave has mentioned. And also be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com. Check out our upcoming services and events. Also check us out on Instagram for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Ollie Chad. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your host. I'm Chad Vaughn with Dave Durante. And until next time, thank you all for listening.